Yes, we are. We are live. It is that time of the week. What's making headlines with REB and, of course, Phil Tarrant from that team in Momentum Media. There's a third face here as well. Reece Rogers, one of the founders of Before You Bid. Today, we're going to be talking about what's making headlines. Of course, we're going to touch on Melbourne. You have to touch on Melbourne if you're talking headlines. And I'm also going to introduce people to Reece Rogers, who's an organisation that's involved with the gym and involved in my business. I handpick everyone that I'm going to deal with. I've got to make sure that they solve a problem. Phil, I'd love you to chime in as well, because you buy real estate and you know what it's like. So Reece, how you going?
Very well, Tom. Thanks for having us on. Very excited.
Yeah, you look like you work at a real tech office, not a virtual ground tech office like myself. So, Reece, Before You Bid, who are they? What do they do?
Yeah, so we launched about 5 years ago. We had our anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and we're a portal for delivering building and pest inspection reports nationally, and also strata reports in New South Wales. So we've kind of flipped the approach of that to be like a consumer, maybe a conveyancer, mortgage broker-driven product, to actually putting it in the hands of the real estate agent industry so that they can kind of control the narrative around properties they're selling, and also get some good data and just be more open, transparent agents.
Yeah, so I love your product. And the reason I like it is not as an agent, but more as a consumer. But I can see how agents get value out of it. Because, Phil, where I've bought real estate in the past has not been new homes. It's been homes in Newtown, Enmore, Marrickville, Croydon. And most of these properties are, heritage, Californian bungalow, Edwardian homes. They're older homes. And a lot of those properties did go to auction. And even when they didn't go to auction, it was a for sale and it was always a race to exchange. So essentially, you do your due diligence and you got no guarantee of actually buying the property. And this is a thing that it does buyers' heads in, right? And that's why a lot of the times agents got in trouble for this underquoting issue. Because what would happen is a buyer would think they'd be able to buy a property for 900. They'd go along, right? Do a pest, do a building, get a lawyer to look at a contract, emotionally fall in love with the property. It sells for 1.1. They're spewing, and they're, $700-800 out of pocket and all of that. And I'm curious, Phil, do you do, when you buy property, do you do inspections?
I do, and I know I've got a spreadsheet somewhere of every single property I've looked at that paid for an inspection on, and I know how big that number is of all those pest and building inspections I've done. And they can be like up over $700-800, right? If you do it properly. I buy a lot of stuff interstate as well, so I think half of my portfolio I've never actually seen the properties. I've had people do it for me, but I've paid for inspections on all of them, plus all the other stuff that I wasn't successful in, whether it's at auction or otherwise. So it's a pain point for investors. And it sounds like this is a solution to, in some way, commoditize the building inspection. So there's a report. If a report's done on the building inspection today by someone else, like it's pretty consistent. It's not going to change much over 6 months or a year. So is it pretty much allowing investors or owner-occupiers to tap into that? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so what we do is generally the agent will have a chat with the vendor and say we like to get a report up front because we think it helps sell your property, because we're more transparent. More bidders can buy with confidence. If you look at it, Tom, and you know this, some people do get uncomfortable at auction. They're just a bit nervous, or they just don't like them because they are going, well, I can't, I don't want to spend $500-600 and maybe miss out. Where if you get a report up front, and we've got a few different kind of vendor models to tailor the agent's preferences, but if you get a report up front, it can be as little as $49 to have a look at it, bid on the property with confidence, and that can be your underbidder pushing it up by tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, or your top bidder getting you above reserve. So it works really well from the consumer point of view, as well as for the vendors in getting that price up, because they're getting more people there and more people interested.
Okay, so let me just work. So if I turn around and look at the stakeholders in an equation, you got a vendor, you got a buyer, you got an agent. So for the vendor, by the sounds of it, Reece, you should be happy, because what actually happens is, you know, that you're going to have that buyer who sits on the fence about spending the money will actually potentially come along and be interested in your property, and that can be as an auction or for sale. So that's the value for a vendor. More buyers, more competition.
Exactly. More buyers. And if you think about it, Tom, from another point of view as well, the issues that sometimes are found by building and pest inspection reports, if the vendor has got an opportunity to chat and the agent to chat with the building and pest inspector, you know, pre a marketing campaign, they might want to fix a few things up as well before, you know, putting it on the market, and they've got the opportunity to do that. That's a much easier process than if a buyer gets a building and pest inspection reports, approaches the agent and says, we found, you know, this, and this, and it's $50,000 to fix or something. Whether that's true or not, you know, they can be overinflated, where if the vendor is getting it up front, they can have a good, realistic picture of where their property actually is. And if they do want to fix stuff, then they can, or they can just go to market on that basis.
What's in it for the agent? Because fundamentally the agent is the customer in this product, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So if you look at it, we've got about 1,600 of the top agents in the country using us. We sold 25,000 reports in the last 12 months, and of that, 85% were driven by real estate agents. So definitely they're the driver of it. If you look at why, you know, John McGrath often goes on about being the, you know, transparent integrity option in your area. And this is one way of doing that, where you've got nothing to hide for your buyers. If you look at agents, and most agents, I'm sure, have had sales fall over because of something that's been found in a building and pest inspection from a buyer. Well, this avoids that, because you're getting it up front and you know what's going on. Getting more bidders, and we provide data to the agents on who does download the report. So if you're looking at an open home, you know, 40 people go through. If you know, it's a great one. You got 10 people asking for a sales contract. And then you get the 2 or 3 people that we let you know who actually downloaded the building and pest. Well, you know that, you know, they're pretty red hot buyers and also potential sellers as well.
Hey, Reece, I love prop tech. I'm a big fan of it. And I think it's a real enabler for shaping the way real estate's got to be transacted or held in Australia moving forward. I'm just intrigued. So there's a pest and building report that the agent pays for, so they can market the property with this connected with it. It's open to anyone who might be interested. It gives the buyer a chance to have a bit of a look under the hood initially at that point when they might be shopping around, and it might be a filter for saying, yes, this deserves a lot more interest, or yes, this is a good report. Where do you get the reports from? Are they manufactured by you, or you sit in the middle to aggregate? How does all that work?
Yeah, that's a good question, Phil. So we're a portal for building and pest inspectors and strata inspectors. So we're not an inspections company per se. We are the tech portal for them. So we've got over 250 inspectors nationally, plenty of inspectors. Most of our stuff now comes inbound, where they're approaching us to be part of our panel. And we just make sure they've got the appropriate insurances and terms and conditions, and make sure we cover off all the compliance pieces in each state, because there are some variables there, and control that distribution. So yeah, we are a portal, and if we need to open up somewhere new, we'll just, you know, work with either real estate agents or, you know, good old Google, and find some inspectors in that area.
So this is going to sound like me as a potential investor, and like I'm intrigued by this sort of stuff. So therefore, it's incumbent on the building and pest inspector. So if I'm a building and pest inspector in the western suburbs of Sydney, and I have Blacktown, Seven Hills, Layla Park, it would be incumbent on me to try and do a pest and building inspection of every property in that zone, so it could be housed on this platform for people to access, or real estate agents to buy. Like when is the trigger for doing the pest and building report?
Yeah, it's with the agent in the discussion with the vendor, because they've got to let them into their home, right? So an inspector can't really just turn up and say, I want to do one. The agent's going to say, look, here's the company that we use, we trust, we know they've sorted out all the insurances, the compliance pieces. So you know, if you're an Agent Box client as well, we integrate with Agent Box, so the data automatically feeds into the CRM. We integrate with their websites, their finance partners. So there's a lot we do around the inspection to make it so that it's as seamless as possible for the agent. And the inspectors, from their end, just get to go and do jobs and do inspections instead of having to focus on marketing, because we do all the, we get them the jobs.
Yeah. So the real estate agent requests the inspection to be done, makes that accessible as part of its marketing campaign to whoever's looking at it. So it's a one-time use, because real estate doesn't transact very often. So what would be the half-life on inspection? It's not going to last 3 years, right? You'd need to redo it again if the
for the next sales campaign. Exactly, for the next sales campaign. So there is some variables in how long the reports last. Generally, it's between 90 and 180 days. So plenty of time for a campaign to be done. But you're getting a new one by the time that the property's sold a second time, 7 years later or whatever it was.
And again, this is more prop tech, but it's connected with real estate agents. How big's the addressable market for pest and building inspections in Australia? How many properties are transacted every year? Because I imagine what you would do if you're just doing one report. Traditionally, that might have been 10 people doing one report on one house, whereas this turns it into one report on the one property as an initial. So you're probably doing less reports.
Well, it's interesting. So we had this chat with our inspectors for sure. The last time this was actually looked at, it was only about 40% of properties in Australia were getting inspection reports done.
Is that all?
But this is about 7 years ago. And with what we're building out, I expect that number to go up significantly. It's probably less resales, but more the market size is getting bigger.
So the opportunity is to grow market size. So that's a better outcome for agents, a better outcome for consumers. It means the Holy Grail would be, unless it's a brand new apartment, that 100% of existing properties for sale would have a pest and building report.
Yeah, exactly. That's the aim. That's what we're shooting for.
I've got to tell you, I did my, like people do due diligence before buying a property. I did my due diligence with Before You Bid and John McGrath. They rave about it. David Walker, who's I think REB in the REB top 15 there from Ray White Warunga, is a big fan, and most of the big agents are. And I can see, this is coming across a bit salesy, but I can see how a real estate agent sits there at a listing presentation and says, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, let's make it really easy for people to buy your home. Let's actually make an inspection be put up, have it available. And I'll tell you why I also like it, because I'm in the business of efficiency. I'm in the business of having real estate agents sitting there being dollar productive, list selling, negotiating, right? Putting a deal together, not spending half a day every week going out there, meeting people at a property, hanging around, sitting there, going back for a second building inspection. There is far more efficient ways for real estate agents to be spending their time. So before you bid is beforeyoubid.com.au.
That's it.
How do they hit you up? How do agents?
There's a 1300 number on our website, or you can email through to team at beforeyoubid.com.au, and one of our sales team will reach out for sure.
Okay, I'll make sure that I've got stuff on my end sent out with your contact details. Thanks a lot. What are you going to? You're going to become rich, aren't you?
No, Tom. I'm just trying to change the industry. We're just trying to make it We unfortunately, we're in an industry where real estate agents sometimes have a certain stigma to them. I think this is one way. You can.
You're a lawyer, aren't you?
No, I'm even better. I'm an accountant.
Wow. Okay.
Hey, Tom. Just before you close out, Reece, one last question. You've been at this for 5 years. This whole prop tech space is pretty exciting. How have you gone about growing the platform? I think you said 25,000 sales. So you're generating some revenue, but you got any sort of people involved in this who are right behind it?
Well, if you're asking for a kind of tips for other prop techs, or I'm not sure what side of it, but at the start it was just the grind. I was going out presenting to sales agents and saying, call our 1300 admin team, and they'd call it, and I'd have to pull my car over and say my staff are sick and answer the phone. But we've just slowly built up with me and my brother. Now there's a team of 20 odd here, and it's going well. So we just got to keep on.
And I'll have to say, Phil, I don't know if Sabeen has to be one of the most active ambassadors of a product or brand. You know Sabeen? You've seen her around? Okay. We'll put it this way. Sabeen's the sort of person, real estate agents, open the door, come in, talk to us, right? That's why when I was heading real estate at News Corp, I went in there, we had girls everywhere, right? I know it's a terrible thing to say, but I got to tell you, they've got the ability. A lot of females in the real estate space have got this ability of being, they can read the play, they pay attention to detail, they've got high EQ, and a lot of them now, I've noticed, versus the boys, they've got a lot of high TQ, technology acumen, you know, because they're always looking at, hey, how can I be better? Because I got strong competition from the boys, you know?
Yeah, Sabeen's an absolute star for us. She's just passionate about the product as well. So it's I do sometimes wonder whether I've built a good company or I've just hired well. But anyway.
Thanks a lot, Reese.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Good one.
Thank you. Susan, I'll get you to sort out Reese here. We can stay on for well, he's gone now. So, Phil, have you ever bought a property? Have you ever bought a property without a building inspection?
Never.
Have you? Okay.
No, and this is an important point. And Reese touched on it, that there's legislation is different right across Australia in terms of the auction process or the sales process. So, and this is obviously for real estate agents and mortgage brokers, but I know some property investors tune into it. I actually use a pest and building inspection as a tool for negotiation in some states. And I think about Queensland, for example, because you can essentially sign a contract so you can control the property. You got 14 odd days to pull out of it for essentially any reason you want. Might be a finance reason or whatever. I'll if I like a property and I don't have much time, I'll just secure it, sign the contract, and then I'll do a pest and building inspection after that. And this is not at auction, but this is a sort of private treaty. And then that's when I'll do that work then. So it gives time on my side, and I'll typically find something wrong with it, which allows me to negotiate again on the price.
Hang on a second. So you're saying you'll have an offer and acceptance, then you'll get a report, then you renegotiate the price by saying, have a look at this. It's had, past damage, borer damage. Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Can I ask you?
I use it as a tool.
Have you been able to get any price discounts?
Every time.
Wow.
Every time.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, is that, and this is, and real estate agents need to be conscious of this. It's just part of the process. If you've got smart investors operating in the market, they can control a property and say, yeah, I'll buy it for $500,000. Give me the contract, sign the contract, 14 days cooling off period. Within that 14 days, I can make sure that I get my finance approved. If my finance isn't approved for whatever reason, no worries, don't want it no more. Or I'll do a pest and building report and I'll say, well, Mr. Agent, there's termite damage here. That's going to cost me 10 grand to fix. The roof's leaking. There's another 10 grand. The hot water system stuff, there's another 2 grand. Look, I'm happy to proceed with the sale, but I need 50 grand off the price. Yes or no? And if they say no, you go, all right, you walk. If they say yes, you got 50 grand off.
Well, I've got to tell you, in my time as an agent, I've got to say, I did come across people like you. And yes, I'm thinking about it. A lot of the times they asked for 50 off, but they ended up getting 25 off. It ends up becoming a negotiation. Yeah. But I got to tell you, it used to give me the shits.
I bet you it does.
Right? You used to give me the shits because you've got to basically sell the property a second time, right?
Absolutely.
You've got to sell it. And you've got a vendor that's spitting bricks because they thought they got 950. Now they work out they're getting 925 or 900, or they're scared of losing a sale. They've got a report and they're paranoid now that it's going to happen subsequently if they reject this offer anyway. So they've got this fear in their head that we've got a problem here. So maybe...
So what you need to do, Tom, and here's an opportunity. So last week we had a chat with a buyer's agent, Paul Glossop. Now, more buyer's agents are active in the market, and buyer's agents will be doing this, because it's a greater... If I'm a property investor using a buyer's agent and my buyer's agent goes, I've secured it at this price, it's below market value, but let's do a pest and building special. I'm talking about in Queensland, and let me go back to him. And I could save another 20 grand, $25,000, $30,000, right? Which is more than the price of the buyer's agency fee. So the buyer is happy, the buyer's agent is happy. The vendor, on the other hand, needs management from the real estate agent. So I reckon you're going to see a lot more of this as you get more buyer's agents active in the market, coaching for real estate agents on how to deal with these particular scenarios. Where is the level of negotiation if you just go, no, I'm not moving on it, or how do you actually work out what discounting you need to give on the price because of the results of the pest and building inspection or a finance call, whatever it is, right? Those 14 days up in Queensland, I believe it's 14 days, anything can happen. So the deal's not a deal.
Well, that's why I believe a good real estate agent is worth paying the fee for versus a discount agent. Like, here's a perfect example, right? Where all of a sudden you decided to go with the agent that was 1.5% instead of 2%. And they've got Phil Tarrant, who's come back with a report, and Phil saying, hey, look at this, look at that, drop the price by 50 grand. You've got the agent who was the cheaper one, and often the cheaper one is not the best one because cheap was what got them the business, right? Often, not all the time, but often. So then you've got someone who has a lower capability and they're negotiating with an investor like you, Phil. And what actually happens is you out-negotiate that agent. Whereas if you'd gone for a better agent that was stronger in negotiation, a lot of these agents can read the play really well. And what they'll do is they'll say, hang on a second, I actually feel confident we can get this money. So I'm actually going to play hardball and I'm going to say, no problems, end of story, you're gone, finished, we're not selling to you. Then what actually happens is you go away and you rethink about it and say, shit, well, hang on a second. So that's why I believe it. I've got to tell you, the most powerful 6 words in any negotiation, trust me, everyone, let me come back to you. Right? Let me come back to you, takes the heat off, you go away. You can only really tell where people are at once you've walked away. And I've got to tell you, Phil, it's handy to know what I just found about you, because if I ever come across you at an auction, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. I'm going to have to make sure I've got my A game up.
You're going to need it. But, we both work in sales or around sales, Tom. And if someone wants something and then you take it away from them, that's a powerful thing, right? If I've, as an investor or a buyer, and I've made, you don't know where on the bandwidth of my appetite to something is. If an agent goes, okay, no worries, Mr. Tarrant, no deal. So this is the art form around this. But back to Reese's product, and around an enabler for the agent to support the vendor. If that's all up the front end, so if they're making the pest and building report available at the point that the property is being marketed, there's no unknowns there. That means that $10,000 of termite damage is already there. It's already, you know what you're buying at that point in time. If there is an unknown there, well, that's when you lose control of the negotiation. So it's a huge enabler.
I love it too, because I can, what happens is Phil comes along and says, 900 because of, we found out that, it's got past borer damage. You say, yeah, we know that. That's why we priced it that way. It's already, we know that.
Yeah. It's cool. Yeah. It's funny. I love the science and psychology of it all. But Tom, we're going to get into what's making headlines. Before we do, I need to chat to you about something, mate.
Tell me.
What's with that ventriloquist dummy I've seen getting thrown around? Please don't get it out. Don't.
Really?
Alex, what's his name? Alex or something or other.
He's Phil. Okay. So Phil, sorry. Thanks for bringing him up. Phil, he Bar Italia, which is a restaurant in Leichhardt. What happens is I see him in Bar Italia. So I said to the owner, mate, do you mind if I borrow him? He goes, sure, don't destroy him. I took him out and I had him, and all of a sudden people are speaking to me, and then I brought him home, put him on an Instagram feed, and it ended up getting more views and pretty much all this other content I put out for real estate. And I'm going to make, so Phil, I'm going to go off and do a course, because I'm not very, someone said to me, what you've got to do is you look sideways when you're speaking How you going? You girl? Yeah, I'm going well. Did that look real?
Sort of. He sounds pretty Aussie though. Oh, how's it going?
Yes.
Mate, I got a hot tip for you, Tom. Put it away and leave it there.
Yeah. Look, it's had 5 days. It's had 5 days. Having said that, Phil, my youngest daughter freaked out over it. She actually said, "Tell him to go home." She.
Mate, I wouldn't want, mate. I wouldn't have that in my house. I'd be scared of that thing.
Yeah. So I couldn't get over it. She was scared about it. But anyway, Phil, can I ask you? Do you feel? Are we going to touch on Melbourne at all? I mean, infection.
Yeah, we will do.
Like,
There's a
yesterday
story
was
here.
Yesterday was lower than July. Yesterday's number 222 was the lowest number since July 13.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, today it went up a little bit. But yeah.
Well, there's been some really good TV around it this week, and I think they've actually tracked 90% of all phase 2 COVID cases to one family.
Wow.
Yeah, and to that poor family, they've kept them out of the limelight. But the reason why, it's not that family in particular, but it's the quarantining around that family and how that spread to hotel security guards. There's quite a lax culture of security guards, and it's easy to blame the security guards, but it's more so the process around it. I don't think they're given the appropriate training and the appropriate PPE, et cetera, but it just goes to show where process breaks down, how the ramifications and implications of that can be considerable. So yeah, 90% of all cases tracked to the one family, mate.
Look, at 5 o'clock this morning, I was getting quickly a mid-morning snack. Someone walked into the shop. It's stock standard now. You pull out your mobile phone, you press on the QR code, you register in. This person said, "Hey, can you tell me where in the act it says I've got to give you my details?" And the owner of the shop, give him credit, said, "Mate, get out." That was it. There was no, you just get out, right? So this guy here, he was in no room for bringing out any law or act to explain he's got to get their data. He just thought, "I've had enough of these smarties. Yeah. Just get out." I'd rather not have you in the shop.
It's just not necessary. Like, how valuable is people's data? Unless you're doing something wrong, you probably don't need to worry about it. But yeah, so that's what's happening in Melbourne right now. I heard the numbers. It's going in the right trajectory. It is better now than what it was a couple of weeks ago. They've extended it another 6 weeks on the lockdown. That sounds a reasonable and appropriate thing to do right now. That seems to have some sense of control over it. So let's see what happens. I think, we're at that point in time with all the finger pointings going on and who's responsible for this. So that will dissipate over time, but no doubt there'll be some inconclusive findings around it, and no one will actually be, penalized for it. But I think if the whole of the nation can learn from this outcome and just maintain vigilance and make sure they don't get lax, even though things seem to be getting better. It's when things slip, is when things go wrong, and this isn't going away. I saw Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, is close to landing a deal for the vaccine. And Tom, you'd enjoy this. I had a chat yesterday, and I'll send it over to you, with the chief scientist at the CSIRO, Kathy Foley, who's right at the pointy end of the vaccine options available and how that will be manufactured here in Australia. And that's as close as you're going to get to someone in Australia that knows actually what's happening. And there's a whole bunch of vaccines getting tested right now. There's one in Russia in particular, which is well advanced, but they're quite lax when it comes to some of the bureaucratic and ethical requirements around it. She said where Australia is right now, there's some good options on the table. They're beefing up the manufacturing capability. So when Australia does secure the rights to or finds the appropriate vaccine, that we can actually get it made here in Australia. And that deal's taking place right now. And there's deals there from the delivery mechanisms as well around, securing the syringes in order to get into as many Australians as possible. So it's a really intriguing, complex scenario, because you've got the science connected with the vaccine, but then you've also got the ethics around the delivery of it. And this is where it's going to come out. I think there's going to be a lot of Australians who just will choose not to get the vaccine because they're concerned about how thorough it is or what the side effects are. And You know, I think Australia, compared to most of at least the developing world, but also to the Western world, has pretty high standards when it comes to it. So I'd like to think that when there is a vaccine available, it should be pretty well tested, and there should be a level of confidence to actually do it. And the government's going to make it free as well.
Okay, so that's all positive stuff, and I'm glad you brought it up, Phil. We haven't watched the interview, and some of our viewers won't end up watching the interview. Did you get a sense, was that piece that you did with that CSIRO scientist suggest to you that she felt confident there would be a vaccine, and when?
She's confident that there is a mechanism in place to develop a vaccine, but she said, and I'll have to get the numbers right, that literally maybe 1% of vaccines or of potential actually turn into a deliverable vaccine that is effective.
Right.
And the first one is nowhere near as good as the second one, as the third one. And she used polio as an example here in Australia. Polio, by and large, is eradicated in Australia. But there has been a number of iterations of the vaccine over time in order to get to the point where it is absolutely able to eliminate that particular disease or virus. So where we are is right at the start of it. So the first vaccine isn't going to be perfect. And it is a process that people need to embrace as that changes over time. So she's confident that the mechanism's in place for us to get there, but it's not going to happen quickly. It's not, by memory, it's not going to happen this year, but there is a process in place for us to have that. So this is around the outcome of eradication of the virus, but it took decades for them to eradicate polio, and it's still out there in parts of the third world. So this thing is never going to go away. It is a unique virus. What she did say, though, is that they're not from a standing start. So a lot of people think COVID-19 is some brand new virus that's just come out of the blocks and no one knows what's going on. They'd already started developing baseline vaccines for that family of viruses. So they weren't from a standing start. They were already down the pathway of creating vaccines for stuff like this. It's just really a changing of some of the dynamics of that in order to make it absolutely relevant for the COVID-19 vaccine. And by no means I'm a scientist. So I'm just really trying to remember the conversation I had with her, and I don't want any of this to be, my view or factual around it, but that's the narrative from it. So it wasn't a standing start. Australia does pretty well in this regards. We're well considered globally for our capabilities here in terms of vaccine development and delivery and distribution. And we had some smart people already working on this stuff. So that's encouraging. But still, for our friends and colleagues down in Melbourne, real estate agents and mortgage brokers who are still locked up, there's still another month there, mate. Still another month of lockdown.
Well, look, if you really, if you look at the numbers, they're only they're about a third into it. They've still got most of the lockdown to go to. I've had a number of real estate agents in the last 1 week show definite signs of mental health issues, reaching out, and the dialogue that they've had has been enough for me to actually create a slide which has got the 7 most important contact numbers for health in Victoria. There's no question about it, Phil. You shouldn't take, and for me, it's taken a while to understand that every person's got a different level of threshold to the way that they cope with uncertainty and chaos in life. And some people that have got an underlying issue, this is a thing that tips them over. For other people, Phil, there's been family conflict there, and it's actually exposed even more when people are at home and, tense, and then you've got the economic stress that's created in families. So keep our fingers crossed over the next 4 weeks we get to under 20 cases in Victoria, and then it's become something that's manageable and people can go out. I'm curious, what were the main stories apart from Melbourne that you guys have carried in the last couple?
Yeah, sure. So I'd probably aggregate the top 3 stories into what typically drives a lot of the news within real estate, and then that who's who of the zoo and who's doing what and who's going where. And there's 3 headlines here, Tom. Di Jones to hit Sydney's northern beaches, Double Bay duo to take on eastern suburbs, and AFL legend returns to roots with industry debut. So this is all about people. This is all about people swapping brands, the sign on the door, moving their franchise networks. This stuff, irrespective of whether it's real estate or anything else, is the driver of news. And Di Jones hit Sydney's Northern Beaches. They've been growing in that for quite some time. I've seen a lot of, I live around the North Shore of Sydney. I've seen a lot of agents rebranding into Di Jones, and I could think of 3 or 4 of them just off the top of my head. So
it's good.
Something's going right there at Di Jones, and I know there's some of the incumbents who are quite concerned about their expansion. Yeah,
long-term brand in the market. Di Jones, who was a friend of mine, and she's not with us anymore. But it's good to see that her brand is she's left a legacy there, and it's expanding. And then you indicated the Double Bay. I think I read that article.
Yeah, Peter Starr and what is it, Alan Waitsman. They're teamed up and they're getting in there, which is interesting. And then there's Jason Ackermanis for our Melbourne viewers. Brizzy Lions footballer Acker has been announced as joining Ray White Ascot. The new role.
So he's a famous AFL player, is he?
Yeah. The new role marks return to Queensland for the Brownlow medalist and 248 game AFL veteran who hasn't lived in the Sunshine State for more than a decade. So there he is in real estate. He's quite polarizing as well. People either loved him or loathed him. Let's see how he goes okay in real estate. I think everyone wants to love him then.
Well, I'll tell you, footy's an interesting one. When I'm watching people transition from sport into real estate, and it does happen, Molson, who is the famous St. George Balmain West Tigers fullback. I'm not quite sure if he's still with McGrath's. Polomounta was a halfback for the Bulldogs that I ran into selling real estate in the Sunshine Coast. And then you've got a guy who's actually smashing it. I've just had a mental blank on his surname. He sells out Western Suburbs. He's written $1 million in GCI. I know his first name's Shannon. And he's an incredible writer of business. It's interesting, Phil. Sports people are hit and miss in real estate. And I've actually had a long conversation with a lot of people that have transitioned from sport into real estate. And what happens is one of the challenges that they have is whilst they've got profile and they've got a competitive streak in them, and whilst they're, people that are disciplined, what they do lack in real estate is the structure. You see, in real estate, you can actually do nothing all day. When you're a football player, there's a timetable. There's someone that's saying, you've got to be here at this time. We've got a video training session at this time. We've got, a game that we're playing, a friendly at this time. Everything is set up for you. Flights are all organized. Training schedules, massages, they're all organized. You come into real estate, you pretty much got all the time in the world and you've got to manage your own time. And that's what brings a lot of sports stars down in real estate, Phil.
And I can see how that's happening. And if you sort of apply that to the mortgage broker space, you have a lot of bankers, career bankers, whether in the main banks, who are very good at finance and very good in their job within the structure of a large corporate, who decide to leave that and become a mortgage broker. And then they're the person that has to fix the fax machine. They're the person that needs to make sure that the internet is working. They're the person that needs to go out there and find business. And they struggle as well because they don't have the structure which has enabled them to do that job well. Some people transition really well to it, but a lot of people absolutely struggle. And for a lot of people, whether it's broking or real estate or small business in general, once you're out there by yourself and you've had the trappings of structure and architecture and someone telling you what to do, it's very hard for them to actually thrive in a world where they're ultimately accountable and responsible. And Tom, there's a story here. It was late press to us from Grace Ormsby, my team here, who helps put our top stories together every single day. And it's about a story from how mortgage broking has changed over the last couple of years. And it made me just think about a good discussion I had yesterday with him quite well, Peter White, the managing director of the FBAA, the Finance Brokers Association of Australia. And we're talking about the how much mortgage broking has changed in the last 2 decades. Upwards of 60% of all home loans now are driven by mortgage brokers or through the third-party channel. And there's a story here that come through. It was on the advisor.com.au today. Educate Australians on property as an asset class. And this is Mark Burris, who I know you caught up with recently, Tom. Says he noted that the role of brokers has changed over his career, stating, brokers have evolved from where they were in the days when I established Wizard. Back then, we were basically just pass-throughs. You come into the office and we gave you a loan. The approval process was very simple, very fast, very efficient. And we asked hardly any questions, and all that was about getting it done. He continued that he believed mortgage brokers had now become much closer to advisors and could do more to educate buyers on property. This is a quote. I think all brokers who are listening to this, if you are talking to your clients, you must remember one thing is that you should use all the mediums, social mediums, emails, text, telephones, etc., to talk to your clients and educate them. So rather than just being a commodity, sitting there doing some paperwork, mortgage brokers now are educators and they're trusted advisor. They don't give financial advice, but they are trusted advisor. And that's the demand now from people transacting in real estate, whether it's brokers or agents, Tom.
Yeah, and I definitely see the difference. I've got a great broker. I know you've got a great broker. My broker fits into that category, right? And I don't have a lot to do with him, but every time I do interact with him, I've got to tell you, he just feels like he knows everything. And I think that's what you want in a broker. You want someone that's got the ability to have a view and an opinion on things. And I think Mark Burris is definitely onto something there, because you starting this conversation about, sports people and their ability to, get business. But I've got to say to you, mortgage brokers, you're right. These bankers would be sitting in the office expecting a client to walk in. The client would actually basically be begging for a loan. The banker really was a one-trick pony. They had one loan, right? It was the product that they were there. They'd sit there and they'd give them this loan, and all of a sudden, these guys have been punched in the face because the mortgage broking industry says, hey, don't worry, we'll come to you. And if it's complicated, we'll sort it out. Not only that, don't think we've got that much commission breath, because if you don't like this product, I'll give you another 27. So that's the struggle that you've got with people that don't like change.
And you've probably seen it a lot in your coaching business, Tom, and you must get frustrated sometimes when, just because of the environmental circumstance that someone has come up through, whatever industry it is, if it is something that is very structured, sport, banking, whatever it is, to be a master of your own domain, it's bloody hard and you don't always get it right. And sometimes you've got to force yourself to do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. It's the only way you can be successful. That's the difference between a good broker and a great broker.
Yeah. Look, to answer your question, does it upset me? Well, not really, because it gives me a living.
You need people like this, Tom, to help.
I need them. I need people that have problems, that have no structure. I need people that won't listen to what they should be doing. I need people to actually have a problem in sales, because that way I can make a living.
Have you ever given up on anyone?
Oh, yes. Oh, have I given up? I sack a lot of clients, because
so you actually sack your coaching clients. You go, no, I can't help you.
So many, you'd be shocked. What would actually happens is you actually just feel that the fourth time they've said to you, Tom, the reason this didn't happen is because my mother-in-law had come over from Toowoomba. She was staying over. And that, like the fourth time, first it was the mother-in-law. Second time is, you had a cold. The third times. So if I see 4 or 5 excuses, what actually is happening is it's demotivating me a little bit, because I don't want to be known as the guy that actually can't get results. So it's not good for me to have someone who just wants someone to have a chat with and nothing else. I actually need people to say, Panos, help me. Panos did this. So yes, and look, I'm also fortunate, Phil, because I don't need that side of my business. One-on-one coaching is something that I'm not dependent on. So and by the way, I became a great coach when I no longer needed to coach. Why? Because you can tell people exactly what they need to hear, not what keeps them coming back to you.
What's your best moment in coaching in your career so far in real estate?
The best moment was a conversation. I'm not going to mention his name, New South Wales agent. We were sitting there and he said to me, Phil, I want to write $1 million. And I sort of said, why would you want to write $1 million? This is a very worthwhile story for everyone to listen to. Why do you want to write $1 million? He says, I want to write $1 million. I want to be $1 million agent. I go, but why not 990? And he said, no, $1 million. I go, but why? He goes, it feels good, $1 million. And I go, and what will you do with $1 million? You write $1 million. He goes, well, I'll get 500 of it because the rest of it goes to the agency. I said, right. And what will you do with the 500? And he goes, I'll get a Maserati. Okay. And anything else? He goes, yeah, I get a 1-bedroom unit in Bondi. I said, okay. So you want to write $1 million so you can get yourself a Maserati and a 1-bedroom unit in Bondi? Yeah. He goes, yeah. I go, and why would you do that? And he goes, I've always wanted to get a car that, stands out. It's a little bit nicer. It's not your common Mercedes Benz or BM that everyone drives. And I go, why Bondi? He goes, well, it's the place to be. And if I've got a Merc and if I've got a Maserati and I've got a 1-bedroom unit, he goes, I'm going to be able to get the girl of my dreams. I said, all right. I go, and why is that important? And there was silence, Phil. And he looked down, and for the first time, I could tell now the mask had come off. He says, I'll tell you why. Because when I get this done in the next 2 years, my mother and father are going to come over to my place for Christmas at my unit in Bondi, and they can bring my brother along as well. And I'm going to show them this guy that they said is a loser. This guy that they said would never make it in life is proved them wrong. And I'm going to rub it in their face. And I said, what's that all about? Why'd you get angry all of a sudden? He goes, mate, they treated me like I was dumb. My brother's studying medicine. He's about to graduate. He was always the kid that everyone looked up to. I was a guy that struggled. I had ADD. I struggled through school and everyone laughed at me. And now that I'm writing good money, people have started to take note and I'm going to show them. And Phil, to me, that highlighted behind every motivated person, if you peel the onion, there's something, right? And a lot of the times it's a deficiency. It's something that you feel, I will do this because of this reason. And for him, he wanted to show evidence to his mother and father that he would end up being more than fine in life, And that to me was a profound moment because it made me realize whenever someone says something, dig deeper to find out why are they really saying it? Who wants to write $1 million? It's just money. The point is, what does it actually do? Good question for our viewers to think about it. What is it that is going to drive them to actually go to the nth degree?
And I guess it's not your job as a coach to, give your opinion on what people's motivations are, but is that okay that was his reason for doing what he was doing?
Phil, that's a very, very good question, because one of the things I've noticed about top performers, whether they're a mortgage broker or real estate agent or anyone really in business, often the driver, often the compelling force that gets them to go through shit that other people won't go through is some deficiency. Right? It is something, some gap there, right? So on the surface, you'd think to yourself, is that a healthy thing? But on the other hand, if that issue drives you and helps you achieve a life that you feel is better, so be it. I have a personal view that you can get to the point where if you're always chasing and never arriving, that is a formula for unhappiness. A beautiful post during the week I read from Jordan Peterson. It said, the reason often very successful, wealthy people become unhappy is that whilst their net worth increases, their friends change. So the comparison game they play keeps going. That makes sense to you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And have you ever met a successful person without this deficiency you talk about?
Geez, I like the questions you ask.
Yeah. So I've just this is supposed to be what's making headlines, but I quite like the philosophy behind it all, right?
Have I met a?
Because I'm thinking now about what my deficiencies are, and I'm probably pretty clear on what they are, right? But whether or not that's a motivating force that determines my actions, I don't know. It's quite Freudian, but
So Phil, what I do notice. So I don't know if they had a deficiency, but I notice people in their second stage of life. And when I say second stage, they're normally more than halfway home, right? They're on the home stretch. So they're people that are, 50 onwards. You notice that they sort of chill down a little bit because they've sort of worked out, hey, you know what? Like, I ain't going broke. And the formula of comparison and trying to be better than the next person, hasn't necessarily made me that happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the rest of my life actually doing things that make me feel good on the inside than making me look good on the outside, right? So I think I notice a group of people that are just far more relaxed, not stressing too much about, go, because if I don't do that, someone's going to win and I'm going to lose. And I think that they chill out. And, Phil, I've got to tell you, I'm hopefully aspiring to be going down that path. I mean, obviously, anyone that's had illness or, a punch in the face, or they've had the suffering of losing a loved one, they probably think at life differently, I think. Yeah, but they're good questions. You ask good questions, Phil. And I reckon asking good questions, like it'd be good to ask these questions to yourself. Like, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, what was it? What's been the driver for me? And I think one thing is for sure, drivers do change, but what pumped you up when you were 25 is different what pumped you when you're 40. And what pumps you when you're 55, it's different,
So I'm of the school of thought that you don't want to overthink too much, but you got to be comfortable with when you do think about stuff that you can embrace those thoughts that you have. So the questions that I just asked you, I think everyone should be asking themselves, because that's how you become self-aware and you actually know what makes yourself tick. And only when you know what makes yourself tick can you actually be highly capable. I think there's a lot of people who just don't know how to do that. And this is the difference between maybe EQ and IQ in some ways. And I find that people who are more comfortable, they're in their own skin, are much better listeners and therefore much better at what they do for a living, whatever that is. And that echoes with real estate agents and mortgage brokers. You don't want to talk too much. You're better off using your ears for most things. And that's how you be successful.
I love that. Phil, hit me up with one more story before
All right, here we go. Okay, let's move over to on the advisor. First home buyers helping pick up the slack amid COVID drag. First home buyers have reserved approximately 65% of the places available in the second phase of the first home LDS since the second round in July, according to Michael Sukker, who's his assistant treasurer. So what this is really talking about is market fluctuations. If we go back to 2017, 2018, we had APRA, huge oversight, the regulatory body on investment lending, trying to slow down the market, slow down the spate of change around the housing affordability and price growth, tried to slow down property investors. We've seen a natural equilibrium now into first home buyers emerging as one of the steady areas, growing areas within buying or real estate transactions. So for a lot of agents, traditionally, investors have been a big buyer of properties or sellers of properties, but don't forget the first home buyers right now. They're active right now. Money is as cheap as it ever has been. I think NAB is giving its cheapest interest rate since the 1970s at the moment. So real estate agents, those young couples knocking on your door saying, hey, Mr. Agent, I'd like to buy this property. We've got cash. We're ready to go. They're attractive right now.
I agree. I can see it myself. Under 800,000, Phil, they're flying out. They're flying out like hotcakes. Even now, I've got a message that's come through while our stream was going on. The property, it's in your area, by the way, I think. No, sorry, it's in Waterloo. Waterloo, first home buyer range, the real estate agent put down, Tom, turn the oven on. We're making hotcakes. Get ready for it. So first home buyer range is red hot, Phil, red hot.
Absolutely red hot right now. So we're keeping a close eye on it. It largely within real estate business, it doesn't necessarily change the commentary around it all. It's just really visibility and market awareness for agents. But, it goes back to it. There is people out there buying properties right now. You can sit around and complain about listing volumes are down and there's not many opportunities out there. But those properties that you can list, you should be able to sell in this market. There's someone out there to buy it.
Phil Tarrant, REB, Momentum Media, another good week. What's making headlines? We'll see you next week. We'll touch on everything real estate, life, property management, property investing, mortgage brokers, and the great Phil Tarrant journalist questions about life and philosophy.
See you, Tom. Thanks for your time, mate. Get rid of that mannequin.
Yeah, he's going on Sunday. Thank you.
Hey, hang on a sec. Before you leave, I want you to do the auction, him to do the auction on a weekend. Please. Yeah. Please show me how it would happen.
At $850,000 now, going once, twice, third and final call, sold to Phil Tarrant, his 50th property in his portfolio. Well done, Phil.
See you, Tommy.